I never thought silence could be so loud. But in that house, it screamed every single night. They didn't have kids. A few years back, she took a job overseas, a big opportunity, the kind you don't just walk away from. They both agreed it was the smart move. In the beginning, they FaceTimed every night, then every other day, then just quick little texts. Eventually, the only thing left was an emotionless goodnight. The signs didn't hit all at once, but over time they stacked up. Her wedding ring disappeared from photos. The selfies were all cropped tighter. Then there was a group picture from some office party, and she was standing just a little too close to someone. Still, he tried not to jump to conclusions. Until the day she forgot to log out of her messages on their shared tablet. He opened the app without thinking, and there it was. A thread of messages. Polite. Friendly. But one stood out and sliced through him like a knife. Thanks for last night. I can't wait to see you again. He read it again and again, hoping maybe he misunderstood. But there was no other way to read it. He called her. No greeting. No hesitation. Just one question. Are you cheating on me? She didn't deny it. She froze, looked away from the camera. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely. It happened. Her voice cracked while she spoke. She tried to explain that it didn't mean anything, that it just filled the space he left behind, but none of it mattered anymore. It was too late. After the call, he sat in the dark. He didn't cry, didn't yell, just sat there, completely hollow. Eventually, the rage came. He shattered a glass, then another, punched a hole in the drywall, screamed at the walls, cursed her name, cursed his own, asked himself if it was his fault, if maybe he hadn't called enough, that maybe he should have flown out there. Anything to stop it. The days blurred together. He didn't sleep, couldn't eat. He walked through his own life like a stranger. Then, slowly, something shifted. Not forgiveness, he wasn't there yet, but the weight started to feel a little less heavy. He looked at their empty bedroom and realized he had been sleeping alone for a long time anyway. He filed for divorce, not out of spite, not to punish her, just because he had to move forward. He didn't post about it, didn't trash her stuff. He packed up, sold a house, and walked away from everything that had gone silent. A few months later, he got a dog, took a new job in another city. One evening, sitting on the porch with a beer in hand, he realized something. He hadn't thought about her all day. And that's when he knew he was healing. He should get back out there. They'd say, like it was just a matter of replacing a broken part. But he wasn't ready, and he didn't want a distraction. What he needed wasn't someone new. He needed to remember who he was before the silence filled everything. He started small, got back into cooking, took long walks with the dog, read books without checking his phone every 10 minutes. He even joined a local woodworking class, something he'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. The house he rented was quiet, but it felt different than before. The silence no longer echoed. It rested. He had a neighbor, an older woman who brought him cookies when he moved in. They'd talk over the fence sometimes, nothing deep, whether the dog, how the tomatoes were doing in her garden. But she had this warm, motherly energy that made him feel okay, just standing there, being seen. One day, a storm knocked out the power. He lit candles, sat on the floor with his dog, and listened to the wind. No TV, no music, just the soft sound of rain and breath. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt still. Not happy, not sad, just okay. And that was enough. He didn't know what the future held. Maybe he'd fall in love again. Maybe not. But he wasn't waiting for someone to fix him anymore. He wasn't searching. He was just living, day by day, step by step, and finally that was more than enough. I never thought silence could be so loud. But in that house, it screamed every single night. I never thought silence could be so loud. But in that house, it screamed every single night. Months turned into seasons, and the quiet rhythm of his new life began to feel less like survival and more like living. The dog, now an old companion, lay curled at his feet as he carved shapes from wood, each cut precise, deliberate, a meditation in motion. One morning, the neighbor woman invited him to a local farmer's market. She promised fresh bread and stories. Hesitant at first, he agreed, partly because the dog loved the walk and partly because he was tired of silence that wasn't chosen. At the market, among the bustle and the smell of ripe peaches, he noticed a small stall with hand-painted journals. The owner, a young woman with paint-splattered hands, caught his eye and smiled gently. "First time?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometimes it helps to write," she said, handing him a blank journal. "Not for anyone else. Just to make sense of the noise inside." He took it, feeling the weight of possibility. That night, under a flickering lamp, he opened the journal and wrote, not about betrayal or loss, but about the rain against the window, the way the dog's breath sounded in sleep, the neighbor's kindness that felt like a thread pulling him back to the world. Days later, a letter arrived, unexpected, from her. Not an apology, not a plea, just words that floated between regret and closure. "I never wanted to hurt you," she wrote. "Maybe we both lost our way in silence." He read it once, then folded it carefully. The silence between them was no longer a scream, but a quiet space where two broken stories could rest. He left the letter on the kitchen table, went outside, and sat with his dog under the shade of a spreading oak. The afternoon stretched lazy and warm, the silence now a companion rather than a tormentor. And in that stillness, he realized healing wasn't a destination. It was learning to listen to the quiet without fear, to find life in the spaces between words, and to live, even when the past echoed softly behind him. As the weeks passed, he found himself drawn more and more into the small rhythms of his new life. The journal became a habit, each entry a step forward, a way to untangle the knots in his heart. He wrote about everything, the dog's silly antics, the way the sunlight caught the dust motes in the living room, the way he sometimes caught himself smiling at nothing in particular. One rainy afternoon, while at the woodworking class, he noticed a new face, a woman with paint-stained hands and a shy smile. It was the same woman from the market, the one who had given him the journal. They struck up a conversation, and gradually, their meetings became regular, sharing coffee after class, walking their dogs together, swapping stories about hopes and losses. There was no rush, no pressure. Just two people healing in parallel, finding comfort in shared silence and quiet laughter. He realized that trust could be rebuilt slowly, not by erasing the past, but by building something new alongside it. One evening, as they sat by the fire pit in his backyard, the dog resting at their feet, she reached out and squeezed his hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried more meaning than any grand declaration. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready to step into the future, not by forgetting the silence that once screamed, but by choosing to live beyond it. And as the stars twinkled overhead, he understood that sometimes healing isn't about moving on so much as it is about moving forward, one quiet, hopeful step at a time. Spring came softly that year, bringing with it new life and fresh beginnings. The small town seemed to wake from its long winter slumber, and so did he. Mornings were filled with the smell of blooming flowers and brewing coffee, evenings with gentle talks beneath the open sky. His relationship with the woman deepened, not in a rush or blaze of passion, but in quiet understanding. They shared their fears, their dreams, and the scars they carried. Together, they planted a small garden in his backyard, nurturing seedlings as they nurtured the fragile shoots of trust between them. One afternoon, while tending to the plants, the dog suddenly bolted after a rabbit, yanking the leash from his hand. He chased after them, heart pounding, but then stopped at the edge of the field, watching the dog and rabbit vanish into the tall grass. He stood there for a long time, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little more. It wasn't perfect. The silence still lingered sometimes, but it no longer screamed. It became a soft melody, reminding him of where he'd been and how far he'd come. And in that moment, he realized that healing wasn't about erasing pain, but about making space for hope, for love, for life, however messy and imperfect it might be. He turned back toward the house, ready to keep walking forward, one step at a time. Months slipped by quietly, each day weaving new threads into the fabric of his life. The garden flourished, much like the tentative bond between him and the woman. Their laughter grew freer, their silences more comfortable. Healing was no longer a solitary struggle, but a shared journey. One evening, as Autumn painted the world in gold, she surprised him with a small wooden box, intricately carved during her art classes. Inside was a simple note for the pieces you're still putting together. He smiled, heart swelling in a way he hadn't felt in years. The box wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol of acceptance, patience, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. That night, as they sat side by side under the stars, the past felt distant but honored, like an old song played softly in the background. The silence, once so deafening, had transformed into something gentle, a space where healing and hope could finally breathe. And for the first time in a long time, he truly believed that even broken things could become beautiful again. Winter arrived softly, dusting the world in white and bringing a stillness that matched the calm now settled in his heart. The house felt warm, filled with the light of shared moments and quiet companionship. The dog, older now, but still full of life, curled up beside the fireplace as they talked late into the night. One snowy evening, she handed him a photograph, an old picture of two strangers smiling, unaware of the pain that would come, but hopeful nonetheless. "We don't have to be defined by what broke us," she said softly. "We get to decide who we become." He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. The silence that once screamed had softened into a whisper of resilience. It told a story not just of endings, but of the strength to begin again. Outside, snowflakes drifted quietly, blanketing the world in a new promise. And inside, he finally felt home. The months turned colder, and with a biting chill came a heaviness he couldn't shake. The quiet moments that once brought solace now felt like reminders of what he had lost, and what he could never regain. The dog grew frilier, its once bright eyes dimming with each passing day, mirroring the hollow inside him. One evening, after a long walk in the frostbitten air, he found himself alone in the dark house, the silence louder than ever. The walls no longer held memories of healing. They echoed with loneliness and regret. The journal lay forgotten on the table, pages blank where hope once lived. He reached out for the phone but hesitated, the weight of every unanswered call and unsent message pressing down. The future he once imagined slipped further away, replaced by shadows that clung to his every thought. On a night when the wind howled like the screams he'd buried deep inside, he sat by the window, watching the world fade under the cold light of a pale moon. And in that silence, he made his final choice, one that would quiet the noise forever. The house stayed empty after that, the silence now absolute. No longer a scream, but an endless hollow void.